Kriget i Ukraina och sanktionerna mot Ryssland kan drabba mängder av människor, även långt ifrån konflikten.
Food crisis, starvation, new hotspots all over the world.
FN varnar nu, inom 9 månader beräknas 800 miljoner människor hamna i en akut svältrisk. Hur hänger det här ihop? Och varför snackas det om att kriget kan sätta punkt för globaliseringen? Det har blivit dags för vårbruk i Ukraina. Det ska plöjas, harvas och gödslas. Och sen sås. Framförallt vete, precis som alla andra år. Men med undantaget att 2022 inte är något vanligt år. Rysslands krig i Ukraina riskerar inte bara livet på soldater och civilbefolkning. Inom kort väntar också ett annat hot.
A very significant and high likelihood of major global famine over the next year or so.
Det här är David Friedberg, vd på The Production Board, som bland annat investerar i framtidens jordbruksföretag. Enligt honom är problemet en kedjereaktion i 3 delar.
The first major problem is that wheat, which is exported from Russia and the Ukraine, is largely blocked up right now because of the sanctions and the export controls. Russia and Ukraine combined account for about 25% of the world's wheat supply. Egypt is the largest importer. Egypt uses that wheat to feed their population, and then they also export wheat further down into Africa, where several other nations are critically dependent on that wheat supply. So that's problem one, and it's a very near-term and acute problem. Problem number 2, Russia represents roughly 21% of the global potash market. And potash is one of the 3 main ingredients in fertilizer. And they have now blocked exports of potash through the end of 2022. So as these fertilizer prices become 3 and 4 times more expensive than they have historically, farmers will either reduce the amount of fertilizer they use, and therefore less calories per acre will be produced, or they will just not produce anything because they can't make a profit and they won't farm. And then there's also the other acute problem of planting season, which is underway right now. And there's not a lot of planting happening, and everyone's got different points of view on what's actually happening on the ground. So all 3 of those major factors, the inability to get exports out of Russia and Ukraine today, the concern about planting new crops in Russia and Ukraine right now, this is the planting season right now, and the rising fertilizer prices worldwide because of the block up and the conflict that's happened there. So those all kind of combine to create this really cataclysmic scenario for the next year on, where are we going to get the calories we need?
Det här skapar en akut situation för länder som idag lever på att importera mat. Dessutom skenar bränslepriserna, vilket såklart påverkar användandet av traktorer och andra redskap.
And one more thing.
Det här är Fiona Harvey, klimatreporter på The Guardian.
It comes on top of the COVID-19 pandemic, and a lot of countries, particularly in the developing world, were already very vulnerable. People had gone through their stocks of food. They had gone through their reserves. They'd gone through every bit of spare cash they had. So people were already in a vulnerable state. And that means this is coming at the worst possible time.
ما عدد الوجبات كما نظرتوا الصباح احنا النص صايمين والنص الجهال نقاضي الافراد وده على ما نظرته يعني امامك امام الكهرباء ما هو اللي انا كله المهم انه نعيش كما تعيش النمله في الارض سمكه شويه ما وزعبها بطريق.
FN kraftsamlar nu för att citat ge mat från de hungriga till de svältande. Men redan nu har vissa effekter av den kommande matbristen visat sig. Exempelvis här i Sri Lanka där massprotester brutit ut mot politiker som de tycker har gjort landet beroende av matimport. Sen kriget i Ukraina bröt ut har västvärldens svar varit fler och hårdare sanktioner mot Ryssland. Sanktioner som nu riskerar att försvåra mattillförseln i många länder.
I think the sanctions are the problem. And I said that from the beginning. I said this was the worst idea ever. These sanctions on Russia are going to cause far more harm than good. I'm not sure what good it's giving us, like we're hurting Russian people and Putin's still, having this conflict. So I don't know what the objective was, but it was pretty clear from the beginning that the world is so critically dependent on right now, particularly a non-inflationary energy and fertilizer market. And we've inflated the energy and fertilizer markets beyond anything we've ever seen before because of the sanctions we put on Russia and their response to halt exports of their critical supplies. And here we are kind of, looking around like how we're going to solve it.
Även FN har varnat för hur sanktionerna mot Ryssland kommer att påverka världens livsmedelsförsörjning. Och EU har satt in ett stödpaket åt bönder i Europa som drabbats.
Zamani kwa hii shamba yangu nilikuwa natumia kama 20,000 kununua mbolea, lakini kwa wakati huu imekuwa over 100. Sasa naona hii kazi ya kulima itanishida. Afadhali sasa niache kulima nijaribu kazi nyingine. Juu imekuwa ni hasara.
A importação já está comprometida, né? A gente não sabe essa questão do conflito quando que encerra para poder chegar essa matéria-prima dessa região da Rússia, da Bielorrússia. Então, da onde que o Brasil vai buscar mais fertilizantes, sabe? Então, tem que achar outros mercados, mas as coisas não acontecem tão facilmente, né?
FN varnar särskilt för situationen för de 800 miljoner människor som redan idag lever på under 1200 kalorier om dagen.
The only real way to solve that conundrum is for governments to step in to ensure that farmers can actually get that extra production that we need underway.
The Commission has proposed 500 million euros support package to support EU farm producers affected by the war in Ukraine.
Vid sidan av matkrisen i krigets spår finns ännu ett välkänt hot, klimatförändringarna. Orsakar de dessutom ett år med mycket missväxt, då förvärras situationen ännu mer. I Sverige har vi ett överskott av spannmål och kommer att klara av matkrisen även om priserna väntas stiga. Men kanske kommer det som händer nu förändra framtidens matproduktion på sikt.
Globalization is a 30-year trend. And basically all businesses and all populations around the world have generally benefited from globalization because costs have come down, because you've been able to break apart the supply chain and put one part of the supply chain in the area that is most efficient in that part of the supply chain. The problem is you string together a supply chain where if any step in the supply chain fails because of some local issue, the whole supply chain fails. And so now I believe that the trend for the next decade economically is deglobalization. And there's a lot of ramifications and implications for deglobalization. Number one, prices are going to go up and they're going to stay up for a long time. Number two is you're going to have to invest in infrastructure. And there's a lot of investments that are going to need to be made and are being made to do that by both government and private markets. And so deglobalization, I think, really challenges the notion that over the last 30 years, we felt really good about the way the world's economy is going. We felt really good about more people are getting food cheaper, more people are getting access to healthcare, more people are getting semiconductors and iPhones in our pocket for $100, and everyone's getting on the internet. All these great trends for humanity were enabled by globalization, but we're now realizing the fault of globalization, and redundancy is going to take us a step back. And so, you could kind of see this being like the 1970s, right, where you have an inflationary period, not a lot of economic growth, but a lot of infrastructure investment as people try to figure out the next evolution and how we operate as a species.